Hello, and welcome to Hastings Emerging Futures and Hastings Town Centre, past, present, and future. This is an opportunity for us to look at the Hastings Town Centre and discuss what we want it to be in the future. My name's John Knowles. I'm going to be your host for this evening, and I'm going to be taking you through what we're going to be doing and who we're going to be talking to and what the process will be. But first of all, a little bit of background. The death of the town centre has been pronounced pretty much every year of my life, I think, along with teachers wanting longer holidays and farmers complaining about the weather. But on this occasion, maybe it is time to accept that the town centre really has died or is on its last legs. And if we are going to have a town centre, who is it for and what is its purpose? What do we, the people who live here, want it to be? Now, in most towns, Hastings is going through a bit of an existential crisis in terms of what its town centre is for. We've all learned the ability to click and collect, and we can all get what we want, when we want, anytime we want it. So perhaps the town centre has lost one of its focuses. One of the other things about Hastings Town Centre as a centre is it kind of lacks a centre. It's bisected by a road which cuts the town in two. So we have on the one half the kind of mundane, ubiquitous shops you expect to see in every high street. And then the other quarter, we've got Trinity Triangle, which is the kind of slowly becoming the St. Leonard's creepage of the DFL creatives setting up a little commune there. And that kind of road divides the two, the same in the way that we have a cafe culture in the town centre. But again, bisected by a pedestrian road which goes through the middle of that, creating a little wasteland of its own. And then to make life even worse, we have another road bisecting us from the old town, so you have to go through an underpass to that bit. So it's a very strange town centre, and it also lacks a kind of central feature or a kind of piece of architecture which really draws you to that centre and makes you aware of what it is and what it stands for. When I was a kid growing up in Liverpool, we used to have a phrase that the town centre had been designed by the Luftwaffe, by which we meant that it was mainly made up of bomb sites which nobody had built on yet. And when they did build on it, we knew they were going to build cheap and quick and not necessarily attractive. And that happened quite a lot. And one of the other things that happens in the town centre, of course, is not just the economy of shopping, but the economy of the night time and what that's about. And for a long time, Hastings Town Centre has had drink at the centre of its culture. And if there is a high culture, a high C culture, it's probably at St Mary's or probably at the Printworks. And perhaps that's right and proper. But is that what we want from the town centre? And it's interesting, the old town has a clear vision of itself, its heritage and its events. It's Jack in the Green, it's Bonfire, it's Fat Tuesday. It's all those events which all happen in the old town. St Leonard's is now building itself an image around the creative sector and sort of the DFLs and sort of a creative knick-knack hubbery, as I call it. But it's got a vision of itself. And that, again, is something we need to think about for the town centre. What is it? Is it shopping? Is that entertainment? Is entertainment high culture, low culture? What is it? What is it we want from it? So really, that's the big question of the night: is what do we, the people who've chosen this as our home, want this to be for us and for generations to come? And I think if you're going to start examining what it is you want to be, you have to know where you come from. And that, for me, is essential for discussing where we're going to next, is to come onto that bit of history. How did we end up where we are? How do we get to the town centre that we've got now? Now, I'm really pleased to have with us tonight a talker in a minute called Stephen Peake, who's going to go through that. But before we get to him, just a little bit of housekeeping. This is not a passive evening. We want you engaged. We want you to tell us what your thoughts are. We want you to throw questions at the panelists as we go along. Now, I'm not going to be actually putting those questions to the panel. We're going to have Quiva O'Gorman is going to aim those questions at the panel for us. She'll filter off your questions, but get into the chat, put those questions down, and then we will ask the panelists as we go along. We've also got 3 questions which we're going to ask you directly. Yes, you, sitting at home there. We're going to ask you directly for your input, and we'll have a bit of a poll on what is going on and what your thoughts are around those questions. So get on the chat, put your questions. We'll try and put them to the panelists, and then along the way, we'll also try and create a little poll of what the feelings are around who we are and what we want to be. So like I said, though, we're going to start with a local historian. His name is Steve Peake, and he is going to take us through the history of Hastings Town Centre.
Hello, yes. I'm giving us a slideshow. But before that, perhaps I can just say that in the summer of 1989, I managed to get hold of a rare video camera. These are in the early days of video cameras. And I walked around the town centre, filming all the bits that are about to be lost. All the buildings are going to be demolished and the cricket ground and all that. And you can see all of that film on my website, Hastings Chronicle. It's very interesting. It shows life in the town 32 years ago. And I'm hoping Trinity Triangle and Heart of Hastings can turn it into a good film because it needs editing. But we can get on to my slideshow. Could you show the first one? Right. Now, this is Hastings Town Centre a few years ago. Well, 950 years ago, actually. Just after William the Conqueror conquered it. Castle on the hill, you can see. Over on your left is the White Rock with St Michael's Church on top. So the both hills stuck much further into the sea, and in between them is the valley, a very deep valley, which is draining the many streams inland, which I'll show you in a minute. But the key thing to remember about the history of Hastings Town Centre is that it's built on shingle rather than on solid ground. And this is something that has been discovered or had to be coped with right up until the building of the Priory Meadow Shopping Centre. It's built on shingle more than anything else. Oh, by the way, St Michael's Church stood where the palace chambers are today. But the cliff has fallen. So, next slide, please. Now, this is the first really reliable map of, well, all of Sussex. I mean, 1783. This is just to show how the valley is fed in by streams from up. You can tell because of the contours. You can see which are hills and which are valleys, and each valley has a stream running down it. By 1783, of course, Hastings had moved from the White Rock into what is called the Old Town, which should be called the New Town, really. But that is because the valley, the seafront had silted up with shingle moving along. Longshore drift, it's called. But also because of something else, which I'll explain in a minute. But there are hardly any roads. The one road going up the side of the valley through the word Hastings is not Queen's Road, that's just a Stonefield Road. And running down the middle of the valley is what we now call the Priory Stream, but it's fed from inland. Next one, please. Now, back in, this is a map of 1746, commissioned by Hastings Council, as it then was, to draw, it's part of a much wider map drawing the boundaries of the town. But you can see that there's a thing called the Haven in what is now where the town centre is today. The main, all the houses and that on the right are of course the old town, and you've got the castle, then you've got the Haven, and then you've got the White Rock with a windmill on it. It was always a good place for windmills. Now this Haven has always been a bit of a historic mystery, but I've managed to work out exactly what was going on. Around 1580, there were several prominent business people in the town who managed to persuade the Queen to give a large sum of money to build what there was then called a haven, but we would now call a marina or inland harbour, but a marina is the nearest equivalent, in the Priory Valley. This is not a harbour sticking out into the sea, as was built later. It's a sheltered marina. And the Queen gave them a lot of money, and so they set about spending it. And what they did was they dug out where the Priory Meadow shopping centre is today, between the top end of the shopping centre down to what is now Cambridge Road, and they built an embankment across from the White Rock towards the West Hill, which is the bottom of that line. You can see there's a couple of ducks sitting on top of it. That is an embankment. But before they'd finished building this whole thing, the money disappeared. Somehow the other half of the money had gone somewhere else, maybe for a good life in Eastbourne or something like that. So the whole thing went bust, but they had half built a haven, and they put this embankment up. Now what that did was it stopped the Priory Valley draining properly, and it turned the inland side of that embankment, which is Cambridge Road really now, it turned it into a marshland, a permanent marshland. But on the other side, the seaward side of that embankment, shingle built up, and that's what the Crown could claim when it took possession of the America ground. So this embankment is a very key thing in the history of the town. It defined what was town inland and what was going to become the America ground, and now the whole Robertson Street area. And notice there is a little bridge that's been built connecting the embankment to the West Hill. Next slide, please. Here is a picture taken about the same time, 1750, showing what the town centre looked like then. On the left is that bridge that they built. And in front of us is the Priory stream draining as it could the valley, Priory Valley, as it was then called. But over on the far left is the marshland, which is low. You can see it's lower and it cannot drain. So that was a permanent impediment for the next 100-odd years, or from 1580 to the 1850s, to any building taking place. And going under the cliff, you can just see what is now Castle Street along to the Old Town. Next slide, please. This is 1824, and it shows how far the town had managed to expand then. By the late 1780s, 1790s, the town was really becoming popular as a resort, and it started spreading west because it couldn't go east or north because the Millwood family, who owned most of the land around the town, liked it as it was, so they wouldn't let it be developed. So the town had to go west. But it couldn't go any further than this Priory stream, partly for reasons that to do with the borough boundary, but more than anything to do with the fact they couldn't build on this marshland. And the southern half of the land had been occupied by squatters and other people who thought they'd managed to lease it, and that had become the America ground. That was developed, but the north side was not, where it says Priory Meadow, it was still underdeveloped. And so the developers have managed to build Wellington Square, York Buildings, Castle Street. But by 1824, come to a halt. And now this, you can see this thing called the Priory Bridge. That became the centre of the town. That is now where, if you were standing in the middle of the town looking up all the roads, Queen's Road, Cambridge Road, Robertson Street, you would actually be standing on that bridge, because the stream is underneath it now. Next slide, please. This is 1859, first really good map of all of the borough, and it shows just after the railway had arrived in around 1850 to construct the railway system through Hastings to Rye and then up to Tunbridge Wells. They had to build the tunnels, particularly the tunnel between Hastings Station and Warwick Square. And millions of tons of silt and rubble came out of that. So they spread that all down what we now call Station Road, Havelock Road, Priory Street. That created the land on which those roads could be built. If you were to stand at the top of Havelock Road now, the traffic lights at the junction, and look down, you can look down into Priory Street, and then you're looking down towards the shopping centre. That shows how much Havelock Road has been built up. But it was a coming of the railway and the silt from the tunnels that enabled quite a lot of the wasteland, the meadows, to be built on. That's when you really start to see development taking place. Also, Robertson Street area being built. This is 1859, is the beginning of the really full-scale development of what we now call the town centre. Until about 1850, the town centre had really been in the old town. But the railways enabled the town to move into the Priory Valley. But they still hadn't sorted out the problem with the marsh, most of the marsh. You can see the Priory stream wandering down. Where it does that sharp right-hand end and another right-hand end, that's where the shopping centre is in today. And that is the boundary of this haven. That's where this haven was. They managed to dig it out and spread the diggings around, but there's still a depression there. So at the top you can see the gasworks, by the way, which are interesting things where Morrison's are today. There's still one of the original gas lampposts in the town, but it's not recognised as such. It's an 1830 gas lamppost still standing in the town. Next slide, please. This is 1900, when the town centre really filled up and was spreading up towards Bohemia, all up the north side of the railway line. But you can see that they haven't built on what was the key part of the haven, the cricket ground in green there. And they couldn't build on it because it was still wet underneath. It still had shingle underneath. And when the land was sold all around it, it was decided it wasn't worth trying to build on that particular spot. So he may as well turn it into a cricket ground, which is very nice of them. It was a very nice attraction to the town until Priory Meadow was built. I think it's, next slide, please. This is just to show you the America ground, which is I'm writing this book on, and it's very interesting. The America ground is actually inside the red lines, or the America ground as claimed by the Crown. They are what they officially described as their land, because that's where the shingle is. This 1580 embankment I was telling you about actually runs slightly along the south side of Cambridge Road, which is why that is outside the boundary of the Crown land, because embankment was made of rubble and earth and things, and the Crown could only legally claim ownership of beach, of shingle, and the shingle stopped at the bottom of that embankment, and it didn't spread. The America ground didn't spread west as far as the Crown was concerned, beyond Claremont, because of the complexities of who owned part of the hill there behind and things like that. Complicated story, which you'll have to read my book to find out about. The Priory stream is running down under Harold Place at this time. Now, right in the middle of all this, you can see the Albert Memorial, which is right at the heart of the town. Next slide, please. There it is, built in 1863 in memory of the Queen Victoria's husband who just died, Prince Albert. It's officially called the Prince Albert Memorial Clock Tower. And it was the heart of Hastings, from people like me, I'm an aging youngster who grew up in town. in the 50s and 60s, you always said to people, "I'll meet you at the memorial." You didn't say, "I'll meet you at the town centre." You said, "I'll meet you at the memorial." And it was the heart of Hastings. It really gave something to the, well, an incredible thing to the town. Then, of course, there was a slight fire in the top, and the council decided, as it was causing lots of traffic hazards and whatnot, it was in the way, they would demolish it. And the fire gave them a good excuse to knock it down. One of the people who did knock it down, one of the builders who were up in the top, so he told me that it didn't need to come down. The fire wasn't that bad. It could have been repaired if they wanted to, but they didn't want to. Now, my suggestion for the future of the town centre is to build a memorial to the memorial. I think it'd be great to build something on its place. You could still put something there where it stood. I think it'd be good to build a stainless steel sort of lamppost type thing, about 15 or 20 feet high, with a statue of King Harold on top, looking out to sea, looking out to Europe and all that. And I think it'd be a good attraction. People who like Brexit would like to see King Harold, and the Prime Minister might come and unveil him, things like that, you know. But I think it would also emphasise the link with 1066, which Hastings isn't known around the world for. I think Hastings isn't marketing enough the fact that it's the site of one of the most important battles that ever took place in the history of the world, if you like. Although the battle didn't take place here, of course, it took place somewhere else. There we are. But I think Hastings should build on that more as a marketing tactic for the town centre. So that's all I have to say. So someone else can say something now. If somebody wants to say anything.
Yeah, I'm coming right back at you. Waiting for my video to start up. Hey, welcome back. Thank you very much, Steve. That was fascinating. Thank you very much. Right, we're going to crack right on now with meeting our panelists. We have a fantastic set of panelists for you this evening. These are people who are genuinely actively involved in making the future of the town centre and developing ideas for it. So, starting straight off, we have Kevin Boorman. Kevin Boorman, ladies and gentlemen, who, well, if you've lived in this town any time at all, you will know Kevin Boorman because he does just about every event going in town. He runs the marketing department, and he's lived here for 60 years and been a member of the council for over 20 years. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Kevin. Nice to meet you. See you again.
Thank you, John.
Then we have John Bownas. John Bownas, ladies and gentlemen. He's the manager of Love Hastings. He's working with the Town Centre Business Improvement District. It's a 5-year project, 450 local businesses, £200,000 being brought into the town centre to improve the lighting, the street furniture, to develop shop watch, bar watch, CCTV, tons of stuff going on in the town centre, which John is involved with. And as if that wasn't enough, of course, he also does Hastings Flyers, which is something which was involved in Fat Tuesday, I think. And I'm right in thinking you also did quite a lot of stuff on the pier this year, John. Is that right too?
Well, last year now, time flies by, but yeah, indeed. Yeah. That was the largest live music venue in Europe for a few weeks.
Absolutely. I mean, full credit to you. I mean, an amazing programme in a very, very difficult time. So well done for that one. Then we have, wait for it, James Leather over here, who's with the Hastings Community Land Trust, who are administrating the project and the funding around the Trinity Triangle. That's the Heritage Action Zone there. Lots of partnerships going on between Hastings Borough Council, Hastings Library, different charities and cultural sectors, as well as the amazing project artworks who are involved in that too. Some great stuff going on there. We'll be talking to James a bit later. Welcome, James.
Thank you.
Then we have, of course, Richard Moore. If you're young and in the know, you'll know Richard, because Richard, of course, set up The Source, an amazing BMX company, one of the biggest in the world, I think now, if I'm right in thinking, with operations going on in Hastings, Louisville, and Dusseldorf. There's a combination you never thought you'd hear. Amazing work also with the baths, the White Rock baths, which we have all seen for years and all wanted something to happen there. And Richard Moore and the Source have done an absolutely fantastic thing. It's a thing of beauty as much as anything else, but it's also a place for young people to be. And now, of course, going to phase two, the renovation of the courtyard downstairs. I think it's up to 5 hospitality units, I think, in there. Is it right? Yeah. Which are going to be opening up, I think, if all goes well, around about May this year.
Yeah, COVID permitting, will be open mid-May.
I think we just add COVID permitting to everything we talk about tonight, because it'll be that way. But absolutely great to have you here. Fantastic. And then, of course, we've got the amazing, hold on, my bits of paper. Jess. Hello, Jess. Welcome. Jess Steele, everybody, who in 2016, of course, got an OBE for services to community assets in the UK. Jess has been involved in many community projects in the town, particularly around the heritage of buildings and bringing buildings back to life, really. Famously did lots of work on the pier, but maybe tonight we'll avoid conversations about the pier if we can. But is also currently working on the Observer building and turning that at last into an asset for us all and making it into that. I mean, it's a stunning building and it deserves to have something going. And Jess and her team have been working on that, as well as other ventures in Trinity, I believe, which is like the Claremont as well. And I'm sure lots of other things which she's going to know about later on. And that is our wonderful panel. Like I said, these are all people who are actively involved in the Hastings regeneration and actively involved in putting their own money in some cases, into making this a great town again and making something of the town centre. So what we're going to do is we're going to crack on with some questions. The first one is a kind of open one to everyone, really. That's you, the public, and our lovely panels, which is, if you could bring back something from the past to Hastings, what would it be and why? Would it be a feature? Would it be, I don't know, a spirit of something? And I'm opening that up from West St Leonard's all the way to Rockinore and the whole of the town centre. So fire away with your ideas. What would you bring back from the past and why? Now, I don't know if anybody wants to step in on that one. We could have a little sort of thing from the panel itself. It would seem obvious to go with our historian, of course, if you're still with us. Steve, are you still with us? Is Steve gone?
I can't see
Good. Steve's just gone. He's off.
So, John, I'll pick out,
Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to start my video, but it won't work.
Okay.
Yeah, there we are. Yeah, I'm back again.
I think you've already said what you would bring back from the past. It's the memorial, but is that right? Is that the one feature you'd bring back from the past?
Yes. Sorry, I'll say that again.
If you could bring back a feature from the past and put it back into the town centre, what would it be?
A memorial to the memorial. Revive the memory of the memorial. That's what I would do.
Right. And James, do you have a feature?
Well, I was just going to comment on what Steve's highlighting of the memorial brings to my mind, is that in living memory there have been mistakes made with things losing a memorial that didn't have to be. I think other people feel the cricket ground didn't need necessarily to be lost. And I've also heard people talk about very ambitious ideas of flooding back that area and having the harbour back there that was, I've learned tonight, was never actually ever completed. So it's, I just think in part of our project around the Heritage Action Zone is about hearing all of those stories and learning from those mistakes, not to repeat them, but also to sort of limiting our ambition and not trying to do the impossible and flood the harbour back again that they never built even in the past, but to think of what we've actually still got. And I think there are, both in the building features in the town, I think there is a lot there that is over the years been uncared for, and hopefully we can bring some funding to kind of kickstart that kind of pride and understanding and valuing of that. But it's also to do that with the way that we tell the stories about it and get people connected to that. So we do actually move from just to caring about it and then enjoying it and making the most of it. So that's the kind of theory of change of what the Heritage Action Zone is about. It's both about the physical and the tangible in the buildings and the intangible. So all of those festivals that you were talking about in your introduction, John, it's about how do we have more of that action happening on in the evenings in the town centre.
Brilliant. What a fantastic answer. I'm going to come to a direct question now, one aimed at Kevin. Kevin, as has already been mentioned, we do own this town, one of the most unique selling points in history, 1066. I do remember when I first came down here in 1999, meeting you and asking you, as somebody who designed theme park experiences, and where's your 1066 thing? And it was that hut that's up at the castle. So, Kevin, we own that title. What should we be doing with it? How can we make more of 1066?
Well, I think we should make more of it, John. You're quite right. I've been doing this job for, as you said, over 20 years now. I've lived here all my life, and the castle is the only real direct link we have with the Norman invasion. It's the first Norman-built castle in the country. It should be far better than it is now. I get embarrassed sometimes when I'm showing people around Hastings Castle. I think we should be doing much more with Hastings Castle. It's not for want of trying. When you're in my job, you don't like looking at failures, but I count as my biggest failure, others may differ, that we haven't done more with Hastings Castle. I've actually led 3 bids to improve Hastings Castle for various lottery funds in the past. They were shortlisted, they got very close to being agreed, but they weren't ever successful. The council's never had enough money to make enough of Hastings Castle, but I think it's crying out to be made far better. And I absolutely agree with you. We should be doing far more to celebrate what is the most famous, what makes Hastings the most famous town in the world. And as you know, one of my other jobs is I'm the manager of something called 1066 Country Marketing. We do really promote 1066 Country, but you're absolutely right. The castle, Hastings, should be made much more of. I agree with you.
Great. Okay, I think we'll go move forward to the present day. Is that a good idea? I think it's a good idea. Let's roll forward to the present day. We will try and get some feedback from the public as we go along. I've noticed already we got mention of the bathing pool. That comes up regularly, of course. Making more of the seafront. And the 1066 embroidery has been mentioned here as well, which I think is quite interesting. As well as those idiots leaping off the pier in aeroplanes, which I do think, did that used to happen here, Kevin? I can't remember. I know it happened on the pier. It happened here as well. Put a pier up, somebody will jump off it, I suppose. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to the present day. And I suppose the question really is, what should the town centre be about? Who's it for? Who owns the town centre? What do we want it to be? And we'd like to know from you, the public, really what you would like to see as being the focus for the town centre. Its activity. Is it commerce? Is it shopping? Is it culture? Is that culture high culture, low culture? What is it? What is it you would like to see happening in the town centre, and how would you like to see it used? So I'm going to come for whilst the public are coming back on that one, talk to John Bownas. Are you with us there, John?
I'm indeed, and actually delighted that I think it's Tina has just popped in with the first thing I was going to say, which is the birthplace of TV. You know, we talk about the ancient history of Hastings. We talk about 1066. We talk about the battle. We talk about the castle. Actually, when the students come to town and they're walking around with their clipboards asking questions, and you have a chat to them, and you say, "Oh, and by the way, did you know that TV was born just around the corner?" Their eyes light up. That's like, you know, that's history which is relevant to them. TV is in every room, in every building, around the world, and it was born here in Hastings. And you know, that is something which we really ought to celebrate.
Well, I've got a direct question for you, John, and this is a slightly contentious question, I know, but recently, of course, we had the removal of the seats in the town centre, and that followed on from the removal of the toilets in the town centre. And I'm just wondering, is there a more creative way we can think of dealing with town centre street drinking problems than just removing the furniture, which some of us who are getting a bit older like to sit on occasionally?
I'd love to think the answer to that is yes. Obviously, their answer has to be yes. When I got this job, I was asked the question, what do you see as the big challenges? And the first thing I said was internet shopping. And the second thing I said was the street community. I'd lived here for a year before I got the job. very lucky to get a job that actually allowed me to kind of put me back into the town I'd chosen to, stick some roots down into. They're a difficult group of people to deal with. I mean, it has to be said, there's a huge amount of money spent just with people sat around tables, sat on the end of phones, talking about how do we deal with this group of maybe only a dozen or 20 people. Now, removing a few benches, it helped. Those benches were in the worst possible place for that little group of people to sit. They were right outside the cafes, right outside the spot where, you want to sit down and have a quiet drink, quiet coffee, and, you're being abused, you're being shouted at. I've got shop staff in tears. It was tough. And, every single one of those individuals has got multiple complex needs. They offend in all sorts of different ways. It's not a homelessness issue. Very few of them are homeless. But assertive outreach and kind of creative solutions to their individual problems, yeah, absolutely. As it is, we've lost a few benches. There's 4 or 5 times as many benches still left as we lost within a few seconds. Toilets, well, yeah, we lost one set of toilets, but there's another set a minute away in Priory Meadow, open for exactly the same amount of time. So, yeah, the temporary, and I hope it is temporary removal of a few benches, actually did partially solve the problem. It did move it away. Things have dispersed. Clearly, COVID and everything else kind of kicked in, and there's all sorts of effects that we're feeling. But ultimately, that group of people are responsible for a significant and a massively disproportionate part of Hastings' problem. Even the gnarly old fishermen down in the old town, when I talk to them, say, don't like coming to the town centre because of that lot. Street market traders, I've had 4 or 5 market operators come into Hastings with the offer of, we'd love to do a craft market, we'd love to do something, a continental food market. What they all say when they've come and visited is, right, okay, not while you've still got that lot there. So it's an issue to be dealt with. It's a bigger problem than, as I say, just a few benches.
Well, I highly recommend this book, Utopia for Realists. There's a great chapter in there which talks about City of London having the same problem as we've got, which is 13 street drinkers. And in the end, what they decided to do was actually give them money. And they solved their own problems in the end. It was quite an amazing project. Worth looking up, and I'll send you a link for it if you like. But I think it's that idea that do we trust the poor with money? And in this country, the answer's no, we don't. So maybe there's a creative way we could deal with giving some money to the people who are actually poor and on the streets. I'm going to come to another question about the kind of present day, really, which is to Jess, if that's all right, Jess. Jess, I suppose one of the questions is, I mean, I rather cheekily suggested the town was split into 2, with the town centre, and I know you're shaking your head already. But how do we kind of bridge that gap between the town centre and Trinity, and also with your hat on in particular, what is the kind of role that the private sector money and public debate has in changing those kind of areas, and how do we make it work really?
Well, in terms of the first one, yeah, there are not only 2 zones, but ever since 2006, when I first got involved, it has felt like White Rock and the town centre have been like a missing zone from the strategic thinking. And that's what I've spent the last sort of 15 years trying to change, first with the Pier, then with the Observer and the other buildings in that area. So it is its own place. It's not hopefully going to be colonised by from St Leonard's. It's its own place. It's got its own fantastic history, both ancient and more recent. But also I don't think there's a need necessarily to unify everything, to have a big single plan. That leading into your second point about what can people do, it seems to me that the point about town centre is it's a neighbourhood like any other in some ways, but it's a neighbourhood that many, many more people use, and that lots of different things can happen there. The one thing that shouldn't happen is the domination of retail, and now we'll finally see the end of that domination. That domination has been really dangerous for town centres everywhere. What I'd like to see is more focus on living in the town centre, working, but also leisure, education, not just formal but informal, and kind of well-being, really. That the town centre was talked about as the heart of Hastings. Well, let it be the bit that actually has things that make people happy, things that make people feel good and enjoy life. If we had that sort of vision, then lots of different things can happen there. And in terms of my two priorities are always about involving more people in more direct ways in shaping the place, and also protecting those spaces to make sure they're affordable forever. So not just having some fun little kind of cultural thing that lights the blue touch paper of gentrification, which we see everywhere, but actually making sure that those places are in long-term community ownership so that they can stay affordable, accessible, and great for local people.
Absolutely is. I mean, it's all good points actually there, Jess. Thank you very much. And I think that's again, I am reading some of your chat comments as going along, because it really is important at the end of this that we don't just walk away and imagine that this panel is going to solve all the problems. It really is about you, the people who are listening in on this, getting engaged and getting in touch with everybody who's on here and seeing what you can do. I think it was quite interesting on the chat column here going up. Quite a lot of talk about redirecting the A259 on the seafront and about how great the community spirit was when the road was closed for a day. And in actual fact, the number of times I can think of when the road is closed for bonfire night, Jack in the Green, there is a different atmosphere. And, you know, quite a big idea to try and vision getting rid of the road. But it would be nice, wouldn't it, to have a seafront where you could actually be near the sea without a road in the way of it all the time. Anyway, just an idea there. I think we'll, because we're a bit short of time, we're going to come forward to the future. And the question we gave to the panel on this one, and again, one for you, the public listening into this, is what has inspired you? What thing have you seen in other town centres, in other places, in your own vision maybe, that has inspired you for the future? What would you like to bring here that makes you think, yes, that would be something which would draw people here? And again, going through in running order, I think we got images from the panelists who put things up. Put the first one up, which is from Kevin, I believe. Yes, so this is Kevin's image. I don't know what you say anything about this, Kevin.
No, only that I clearly don't get out as much as some of the other panelists, seeing where they've gone. But I stayed in the county, and I love Lewes. I love Hastings more, but that's different. Lewes has got a really nice feel to it. I think it's quite sprawly, but it doesn't feel like that. I like the bridge over the water. It's just got a really nice homely feel. It's still the county town, and I just think it's got a really good shopping experience, a really good vibrant centre, some really nice independent shops there, and parts of it remind me of the old town, but I think that needs to be replicated or something like that in Hastings. So not as ambitious as some, but something I think is easily achievable.
No, it's a nice place. I always enjoy going to Lewes, so why not? John Bownas, so your image.
Oh, okay. I think that one is actually Rich's, but doesn't really matter because actually they are incredibly similar, and we didn't collude or discuss this in advance. My image was actually of a town somewhere that I've never been before, but I've been to loads of places that look exactly like this, and you can see the difference, but you can also see the similarity. The similarity is that real just focus on outdoor dining, outdoor seating, use of the outdoor space. You know, at the moment, the town centre, so much of it is locked indoors. It's, you know, you go to a venue and you're inside, you go to a venue, you're inside. The whole town is locked into, you know, a kind of like a concrete bubble. And the talk about connecting things to the sea would be absolutely amazing. But the first thing, you know, the easy thing is just make use of that outdoor space in a more productive way to let people enjoy it, talk to each other, socialise. If there's well, anyway, you know, it's a solution to many problems, and it's a simple one. And we've all been to dozens of towns like that. And the question is, why not Hastings? It's not groundbreaking. It's possibly not even imaginative, but you know, it works.
Yeah. Well, James, I don't know where you're coming, because obviously we show your slide then of the very similar street to John's, but what was your reason for picking that? That's not your one. That's. Oh
no, it's Rich. I think that one you're talking about now.
Oh yeah, Richard. Sorry.
Yeah,
Richard.
so that was Dusseldorf, and very similar reasons
Yeah.
to John as well. It's very based on the outdoors and
Yeah, that's it.
outdoor living, outdoor dining. And what you don't see is the whole of, to be honest, most cities in Europe, like Dusseldorf, have amazing cycling lanes, amazing walkways, generally based, in that case, around a river or by the seafront, around kind of the main leisure centre, whether it's a square or a river or a sea. And I definitely think Hastings could maximise the seafront much more than it does. It's our biggest asset, but it's definitely quite hard to get to and quite away from the town, as we all know.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. It's the first thing I noticed when I came down here was this strange fact that I could hardly find any cafe where I could sit and see the sea, and I thought, this is very strange.
Yeah,
this amazing asset, and I can't see it because there's a road in the way.
Yeah, almost impossible to have a beer in the sun in Hastings in the summer.
Okay, and then Richard, if you're there. Oh, sorry, James. I think your one was was it Istanbul?
It was a little bit, maybe a little bit further afield, a bit more exotic. But the reason I went for Istanbul is because I would love to see a Turkish baths in Hastings. But when I was thinking of that, I always went back to my time in a long time ago now in Istanbul. It may be a very changed city now. Was the vibrancy of the evening life, not centering around alcohol. So you had emptying mosques, which are kind of wonderful spaces in their own right to go and kind of contemplate in. But just lots of life going on, even from sort of all ages. And I think really what I would like to capture through that is I see the potential in Hastings for that mixture of young and old, and skateboarders going past, motor scooters. I think sometimes that's controversial, and I picking up a comment that kind of Shelley made in the thing about that loss, that privatization of public space and how it makes things dead. And I always look at that place by Priory Square that runs behind the little Tesco store there onto Priory Street. It just feels this empty, dead space that no one ever thought about. But if there was activity to keep you in the centre of town in the evenings, that would be a really great change, I feel, for Hastings. So not to go home after work and watch TV, but to be around people. And there's plenty of stuff emerging in Hastings that would be possible.
Yeah. By the way, there did used to be a Turkish bath in Hastings.
They did.
Yeah, yeah.
Where was it, and where did they close it?
I'm trying. I think we'll find out. I think one of the community mentioned it as well, actually. But there was definitely was one, and maybe that's something we could find out where it was and dig it back up again and start it up again. Jess, I think I have Jess's image next.
So mine is actually, well, can we have the one before, please, Adam? The other one,
That's it, yeah.
Mine's Granby in Liverpool, and this is a community that was faced 50 years of really horrendous dereliction and threat of demolition and really poor services. And eventually they kind of took matters into their own hands and started commoning. So working together, they painted up the tinned up houses, they planted up the streets, they started a table sale, which turned into a fantastic monthly street market. And so it's this thing about doing it together and local people being directly involved. And the other brilliant thing about Granby, which is sort of shown in the other slide, is that the Community Land Trust took on some of the properties and brought them back as homes. But there were two houses that were just too far gone to be put back as homes. So they turned it into this absolutely fantastic winter garden. And it's just two terraced houses in an ordinary terraced street. And there's something about the level of quality in poorer neighbourhoods which you just don't see. And we need to see that, not because we want to attract rich people, but because we deserve it already. The people who are already in Hastings deserve quality, just like the people in that neighbourhood in Liverpool. And I think it's those two things, the commoning, working together, and the concept of deserving high quality, regardless of the without necessarily having to have gentrification to pay for it.
No, I think that's quite important, actually. And I think, again, following the chat, There's a few comments about the need to have spaces in the town which are high quality, enjoyable, and don't cost money. So they're not part of a sort of you have to buy something to be part of it. It's just something you can enjoy no matter what your pocket has got in it. And that idea of high quality as well is really important to me, I think, as well, that whatever we should do should have that attached to it, whether you're rich or poor, you should have access to those quality spaces. And I think Liverpool, growing up there, I was very well aware of the fact that we had some amazing gardens and amazing buildings which are free to the public. And that changed me as a young child growing up. To have access to those things for free was really, really important. Um, and I think for me personally, spaces which I really enjoyed, Brussels because of its street art. Um, but it's interesting because New Brighton, which is an incredibly poor place, I mean, I used to go across the Mersey to New Brighton for my summers to hang out on the beach. They've now started doing this whole street art project. We're doing amazing street art graphics, and the whole area, which is incredibly run down, has now got this amazing focus around art and around this street graphics, which are bringing tourists in to see the place and bringing money in. So little things like that can make a difference. Um, so I don't know if the public have got any more definite things we should look at. Maybe they'll be highlighted for me in a second. But going on to future questions, uh, one for Richard, really. I think this one is Richard there. Richard's there. He's good here. Um, Again, it's interesting, Richard. I mean, you've kind of got on with Source Park. You've got on with developing that area. You've got on with doing what you do. And there's a lot of talk about engaging with the public. And of course, it was the public who famously gave us Boaty McBoatface. I'm just wondering, at what level is the kind of engagement with the public and what I would call a kind of like slightly benign fascism? Where's the line between the two, really? You know what I mean?
Oh, that's a good question. Don't know how deep to go, but I mean, I don't think you could have come up with an idea, or we couldn't have stumbled across the Source Park by accident and then asked the public what to do with it. It was one of those, as a combination of gut instinct and having had a shop in the town for now 16 years and knowing our customers really, really well and what they do and what they wanted, and just having the, I don't know, the customer knowledge or the market knowledge to just have the instinct to go for it. I suppose we sort of, it was it was a gut feel rather than conducting market research and asking everyone what they wanted. Having said that, it's a quite unusual building that no one knew was there, that was underground. It was the old Turkish baths in Hastings. I was standing in the old steam rooms this morning looking at them that we're developing. So yeah, there's a combination of gut feel that it would be successful and that people would travel to it and that we could hold big events, and I don't know, just being interested in something so, I don't know, so unique and so such an interesting project, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think what you're doing with it, that mix of heritage and actual contemporary design is really exciting, I think. I remember in Manchester, the theatre they built inside the big sort of town hall there looks like a lunar landing module. It you know, on first looking at it, you go, oh, what's that? You know, that doesn't fit in at all. But in a way, that was the beauty of it. It didn't fit in, but it served its purpose absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the Turkish baths were probably like that. The fact that in 1879 it opened and it was dumped between the old seawall and the new seawall on the beach, and the audacity of the Victorians, obviously helped by pillaging the world's resources, the audacity to build this ridiculous thing that they thought people would come to, and for a time they did. Yeah, it's kind of, the building's always encouraged those kind of ideas, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on sort of how we engage the public and what is the route to engaging the public. I mean, obviously, James and Jess, you do a lot of that kind of work. I don't know if you want to come in on that, Jess?
I'd just like to make the point that it's not about voting. That the voting boat face thing is you know, it's not about people voting on things. It's not even about people just putting in their ideas into some process. It's about what Rich was talking about the long-term visible engagement. You were doing community engagement all those years because you were listening to people. You were building up a picture of what people care about. You were chatting, and it's that time, chatting, spending time together, talking about what we want to see, what we care about. That's genuine engagement, and that's what we need to see. And we need to create the spaces in town that can happen. And Source is one of those, the Observer is one of those, the area around the alley, around the back of Claremont. All of those places are places where, if we get it right, people will hang out and they'll talk about everything. And they'll chat about nothing, but they'll also chat about real things, about things they care about and things they want to see happen. And that's what makes the difference, I think.
Okay, well, following on from that, I mean, one of my questions was going to be around the fact that Knowlesley Council has recently bought back the town centre from the private ownership. So I suppose in our case, they've gone, Priory Meadows, thank you very much. We'll buy it back and we'll use the land for what we want it to. So bring back the cricket ground, but not in my case. I don't want to bring back the cricket ground, but they've taken a brave stance of saying, okay, we don't think private investment have done the right thing here. We're going to bring it back into our control and we're going to do something with it. And I suppose the question is to all of you, and come in whoever wants to, what would your mantra be for that change? What would you want to see as that change? And is that kind of bold step something we need? Oh, nobody wants to jump in on that one.
Yeah, I'll jump in
Richard.
on that. Yeah. It's kind of following up on what Jess said earlier, that I completely agree that retail has dominated town centres for so long. And I speak as a retailer, but 99% of our trade is online. So also arguably killing other retailers around the world. I do think that retail has become too dominant. The price of property in towns due to retail is ludicrous and prices local people out from starting businesses. I think it has to be that combination of living in a town and people having that room for ideas and being able to afford to take a gamble with short-term, affordable spaces, and as well just putting a lot more residential property there. I mean, it just seems so obvious that there's all this practically dead space and a shortage of housing at the same time.
Would anybody else like to jump in there?
Yep, I'll pick up on that. I mean, I think the three words that I follow on from that, Rich, would be live, work, sell. You know, live, work, sell. Live in the place that you work and sell the products that you make in that same space. And I don't know. I mean, that goes way back, doesn't it? I mean, that goes way back. I mean, that probably goes back to the history lesson that we had right at the start of this. You know, the 15th century. You know, people would live in a house. They would be cottage industry. They'd be knitting, sewing, making, milling, whatever doing in their property, and then they would sell it from the front door or sell it on the street outside. And I think there's a huge amount of capacity for that in the high streets now, because yeah, people want to buy online. They will always buy online now. You can't stop them from buying online, but they still want that unique sense of kind of connection to some of the products that they buy. You'll buy your cheap and tacky from wherever. You'll buy your hard to get from wherever. But when it comes down to the little knickknacks, the things you put on your shelves, on your wall, those are the things that that make your house a home. You want somehow to feel connected to the people that made them, and actually being able to walk through Debenhams, for instance, and see a potter potting, see a knitter knitting, and on the wall behind them are their products, which you can then buy, and you know that you bought something from the person that actually made it, minutes after it was made. I think there's a real sense of connection there that we could develop. And there's people coming out of retail now who have worked in the sector for years and years and years for the big guys. They've got a huge amount of skills in terms of how to sell things, but they haven't got those big businesses to work for anymore. So I think they're going to start coming out of the woodwork now, going, well, I've got these skills. I know how to sell stuff. Now I'll learn how to make things, and now I'll learn how to curate a collection or whatever it might be, and take on a little unit. But could we fill Debenhams, for instance, with little work, little make sell spaces, turn it into I just thought the other day, actually, putting art back into department store. I don't know, just somehow, keeping Debenhams effectively almost as it is, but just filling it with people, with real creatives, with something to sell. Don't know, there's my thought anyway.
Yeah, no, good thought. I mean, I like the idea of the smaller artisan crafts people making things, but I mean, as you know, John, I mean, there's probably quite a lot of money brought into the town centre by rates and rent paid by the bigger companies. So will that replace that? I think one of the interesting questions which is popping up a couple of times in the chat is we're talking about the future, and a few people have asked the question about the long-term future, 50 years down the road from now, and how we tackle climate change and what we do as a town facing a big rising sea in the future. And of course, we've got problems in the town centre already with the occasional water coming up through the ground. The water level is going to rise and the ground level is going to rise. So how do we deal with that in the future might be an interesting question for somebody as well, actually. James.
John, I'll just make the obvious point that it's not just in the future. Some of us remember, we've got pictures of going back to the early part of the last century where regularly there were rowing boats around the memorial. My grandmother can remember saying the time she went on around the memorial in a rowing boat in about 1918, 1919, whenever, and that's before Sydney Little raised the level of the seafront. Steve Peake's the expert on this, but we had to raise the level of the seafront within the last 100 years to stop the town centre regularly flooding. So it's not just a new problem, but I absolutely agree that more needs to be done, because if we're not careful, we'll end up with the normal model of a harbour where the town centre is now.
Wow, there's a vision. Jess.
John, I was just going to pick. I mean, in the chat, there seems this enormous appetite for doing stuff in public space, and when it comes to climate change, to stop the flooding of the town centre probably needs maybe even some sort of engineering kind of intervention. But it's also, how do we change the way that we live and do things in order that climate change doesn't happen so quickly. And there are lots of ideas in that chat about the biodiversity that could be introduced back into urban spaces, how that involves your community, how that might save money for the public purse, create even jobs. And so it's beginning, and your original kind of question about kind of Knowlesley, where they're buying the, it's about power, isn't it? About how, and I think it was in the chat as well, about how the rules around us stop us being able to use the spaces that how we want to use them. And if we can try and, there is a spirit in Hastings of kind of, well, do you know what, we could do this in the street, which is not to be anarchist by any means, but just to say, let's make things happen. And that's the energy, I think, that sort of sits behind Jess's ideas of get on and do it. Let's do something in the alleyway, and you invigorate something by happening there. So I feel inspired tonight by some of the chat, by the attitude of it's about getting out there and doing something. And I think that's an important part of this in terms of the participation as well.
I think I agree. I mean, one of the things that attracted me about Hastings was it was a place where people didn't talk about doing things. They actually just did. I mean, Jack in the Green wasn't developed by some, scheme of the councils. It was just the people going, we're going to do this. And then eventually you're going to catch on and you're going to make it on your posters. All of the activities I can think of. Fat Tuesday. I mean, again, I don't think anybody asks permission in this town. They just get on with it. And then everybody catches up and goes, yeah, we're going to claim that now because it's too big. You know what I mean? And that for me is the beauty. It's again, it'd be nice to get some of the more the feedback from the people, and maybe if anybody's got any questions, this is a good time to get those questions directly to us so we can ask the panelists, because really it is a town that thinks for itself and does its own thing when it wants to do it, and when it does it, it's just incredible. So if anybody's got any direct questions they're going to ask the panelist, this is a good time to pop up, I think, now.
Hi, John. I've got some questions here.
Fire away.
All right, great. So, well, as you were saying, these people are DIY people, so it's testament to our audience that we've actually got more ideas than questions. I like that. But we do have some questions. So, Sherry Clark asks, what do the panelists see as the most necessary actions, activities, or behaviour for improving the relationship between local government, public, private, voluntary sectors, and local active citizens?
Wow. Okay. Jess, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you want to say that one?
I'd say one really important action. Well, the most important thing is trust. That we need to build trust, and the best way to build trust is to work together on things. So the more partnership projects happen, the over time that builds better trust. But the thing that destroys trust is the overuse of confidentiality. And of course, anything that is to do with commercial in any sense can be called commercially confidential, and that makes people feel that they can't have a conversation because they're not informed. So I worry about the level of confidentiality in the development of new plans. I know that sometimes it has to be, but I think it should be by default. We should be more open, try to be transparent as much as we can be. I mean, I've had experiences, you know, right now I've got an experience where we're trying to buy a building. I don't want to tell you all which building it is, but I do want to talk about it. So I hate confidentiality. As soon as we get a little bit further along the line, I'll be wanting to talk to all and sundry about it. And I just feel that that's what we should be doing, is talking to each other all the time in this kind of way. I'm so excited about this happening tonight. This should have been happening for the whole of the year that we've been through, and it hasn't. So I'm just really glad it started, and let's just keep talking and opening up the potential for the future. But that requires other people to do that too, and I don't see that happening right now.
That's a great answer. Trust is yeah, what a fantastic answer. Trust people. We got to trust each other a bit more, I think. Next question.
Sure. So we have a question. Loads of great ideas. How do we pay for them? And how much are we all willing to pay in time, commitment, higher taxes? Maybe a Hastings 2066 tax is suggested.
Okay. Anyone want to step up for that one? Richard, do you want to put your hand in your pocket? You stayed muted for that one. No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I'm up for that one really. I think there is a lot of money ploughing into the town though. It's whether it's via the town deal, public money, and various other big grants that the town's received over the years. And there's a lot of businesses that have invested. We've been, I think, through this lockdown situation. Obviously, it's been a nightmare for hospitality businesses, especially. And there's so many that are getting loans and really planning for when we can reopen again in spring. I think there's a lot of appetite for people to invest in this town.
Yeah, great. John, Bownas, where's he gone?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Investment is there, and it's investment will follow opportunity. I'm not a businessman. I am public sector. Ingrained. You cut me in half, it'll say public sector all the way through me, except for a little bit at the top where I finally managed to escape and get out into the real world of rich and the real world of business. And I know that there are people who want to invest, but there's two questions there. One is what encourages investment and what stops it. Now, you can't change that. We can't influence the market. We can't influence the things that actually pull investment forward. But what we can do, or when I say we, my old colleagues in local authorities around the country, this is not just Hastings' issue, this is a national, international problem. People sat in government offices need to look at the obstacles that they put in the way of private investment and work out which of those obstacles are actually necessary and which are just there to keep them in a job. Because actually, there's a huge amount of stuff which can just be pulled away, and it's arbitrary. It's, you can object to this, you can allow it. You can object to this, you can allow it. Look at the legislation, look at what you have to stop. Okay, that's fair enough. But anything else, it's arbitrary, it's your decision. So, Kevin, you're the government guy in the room at the moment. I'm sure you know a few rules that could be bent, could be not necessarily broken, but actually they don't exist in the first place. So when talking to planners, is it all right to paint that thing red? Well, actually, you can paint it any colour you like. You don't even need to ask me. So yeah, just understanding what the rules are that can be, are flexible, and having that open conversation around what can we allow to happen. And if in an ideal world, standing up and waving it from the top of the Hastings Castle with a big flag saying, you can do these things in Hastings because we welcome it. Come on in. I don't know what those things are. That's for the private sector to say these are the blocks. So, I'd love to hear potentially an answer from a potential investor who said, I would invest in Hastings, but there's an obstacle. And if we can work out what those obstacles are, knock them out of the way, great. Let's let people get on with it.
Okay. Next question.
Okay, so just on that point of funding, we do have a comment from the audience. So Shelley says, Hastings and Rother Credit Union already exists. Can the bank microlending be developed with them, for example? And then we have a question from Rod Webb. Oh, okay. Councils are inherently cautious and conservative. How do councils reinvent themselves?
Okay, well, that has to be one for Kevin. You there, Kevin?
I am. How do councils reinvent themselves? That's a really interesting question.
How not to be as well, I think, was the question.
How what? Sorry.
How to stop being cautious.
Well, I suspect that this is a Kevin comment, not a council comment. I suspect that anyone who's not cautious wouldn't work for local authorities. When I used to work outside the council, I was often told it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission, but I probably shouldn't say that these days. I actually was the project manager for getting the fishing boat up the station about 15 or 16 years ago now, and that was incredibly difficult, but we got it done, and even then we had to be quite liberal with some of the rules and regulations that we did. And I shall never forget when the low loader turned up early on a Sunday morning to crane the fishing boat off the beach, and we took it very gingerly through the town centre without necessarily quite asking for all the permissions that we should have done. I thought that was a really brave thing to do, but I'm afraid that because councils are who they are, we will always end up erring on the side of caution. And as you said yourself, John, what's great about Hastings is that people sometimes don't ask permission. Jack in the Green, Fat Tuesday, the Carnival, things like that happened. And I like the story of the Old Town Carnival, which only started because the council, well before I started there, obviously, back in the 1960s, refused to let the original carnival go around the old town. So the old towners, being the old towners, said, well, we'll start our own flipping carnival then, and they did. And that's how the Old Town Carnival started. And I remember, I think it was 1969, I was on a float with my granddad driving in the very first procession. And that's because the Old Town refused to be kowtowed by the council and did their own carnival, and the Old Town Carnival still exists today. So there is a can-do attitude, but I'm afraid it's working within the rules and just knowing what you can do and what you can't do. And I can't say any more than that, really. That's an honest answer.
Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah, so we've got two people asking around the same theme. So Suzanne says, what about bringing education back to the heart of our town centres, not just trade and leisure? And Thomas says, with all of the above great ideas, we need to think about how to engage younger people who've lost their jobs, never worked, etc., in being part of the solutions.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, actually. Yeah. I just want to come to James on that, because James, I mean, you're working in the Trinity Triangle, and of course you've got the library there, which is probably a major focus. I mean, I took my kids every Saturday to the library. It was a huge resource for me and my family. I mean, is there something we can build around there for young people and families and education?
Yeah, I think my point of departure in answering that question is with the Heritage Action Zone. We tried to do a bid that had a number of aspects that tried to hit a number of kind of things at the same time. So there was the physical buildings, the dereliction around us, but if you're going to tackle dereliction, is there an opportunity there to train people in a trade while you're tackling that dereliction? Is there a way to learn skills of a higher quality as well? So it's not just about kind of skilled jobs really, and but also that those spaces are trying to create places that increasingly, and perhaps COVID has accelerated this for us, realizing that actually the attractive places to work are actually in the towns that you live, rather than commuting many hours away and back again. And that the young people of Hastings don't have to leave Hastings in order to go and actually work alongside one of the best film editors in the country, or because they're here on their doorstep. And we are moving into a world where that is becoming increasingly more possible. And it's trying to create those opportunities and a number of aspects to that, and also about volunteering, in terms of, as I said, about trying to get that understanding and the caring about the heritage that we have, that using the knowledge of people like Steve and his peer group and that side of things to pass that on to us. Sorry, you have some...
I just want to, I mean, because obviously one of the drawbacks to, I mean, because I remember growing up as a kid, and what changed my life was the Everyman Theatre in Liverpool. And it was the fact that we were taken seriously as young kids going in there. We weren't just a tick box. We were actually on the panel of the Everyman Theatre to give advice about what should happen. Our voice was actually heard. But not only that, but it was a community space. And, you know, at the age of 16, I was downstairs in the bistro bar, hanging out with prostitutes, pimps, poets, writers, thinkers, artists, creatives. That changed my life, that kind of community space. And it does seem that we kind of lack those mixed community spaces in Hastings, which I think are actually one of the things I love about going to gigs in Hastings, is that, you know, you can be next to an 80-year-old and an 8-year-old, and it makes no difference at all. They'll all talk to you. But having those community spaces where we can mix ideas, well, where is that space in Hastings? Where do we do that, if not our town centre? Open question, if anybody.
I hope it will be in this building behind me. You know,
Well, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
those buildings in what we now call the Hastings Commons, they are about that. They're about that diversity, and about being open to all. I always used to think that about the pier, of course, and the pier remains, and let's hope it, you know, it can come back after all of this. It remains crucially important that it's flat and free and open to all. But we can make other spaces that are like that too, and we need to, because some of them need to be under cover. Actual.
I think it's also about young people being given a voice and real presence in things. Like I said, for me, the weird thing was being taken serious, because that, up till then in my life, nobody had taken me seriously. So to suddenly find an institute going, well, yes, whatever you say does matter, I think is important, and bringing younger people into this conversation is really important, I think. Any more questions?
Yes.
Time for a couple more, I think.
Okay, great. So the first is a two-parter. Is there a register of empty buildings? Could they revert to community ownership if they've been empty for a long time? And then the second question, what does everyone want to see in Debenhams?
Oh, there's a big one. Who wants to say that one? Well, John,
well, as to is there a register of empty buildings? Not that I'm aware of, although I am just about to start on a little project to, if you like, well, basically catalogue the empty properties within the town centre and try and find out what their stories are. You know, why are they empty? We've a feeling that actually a lot of them are just transitioning. You know, a lot of them are actually in the process of, if you like, gestating from a moth into a beautiful butterfly. There's a process already in place, behind the scenes, and that'd be great if that's the case. We know there's a good few long termers, and there's some new entries into the catalogue of potentially significant empties. But anyway, yeah, no simple answer to that at the moment. What was the second part of that question?
We were asked what would people like to see in Debenhams, but we also have a question on the same topic from Adam. Could Jess or James talk about bottom-up regeneration, which does address the various spaces which can react to anyone's needs?
Yeah, who wants to take that one? Jess or James? James, look at you lean forward. You go for it, James.
Okay. So I would argue we are a proponent of bottom-up approaches, but whenever I say that, I have to acknowledge that we are not perfect by any means in doing that. We're not anywhere near as inclusive of all of the voices that we could be. So we're on a journey about all of that. I think some of the best examples of where we managed to do that, we had a bottom-up development team that occupied the site up at Ore Valley, and they met regularly for twice a week for 3 years, and they got projects happening on their area. So it can happen. on terms of that inclusivity. And also one of the first things that happened in the Observer building when White Rock bought it was to do the organisation workshop in there, which I think was a great project in the experience of agency and community organising. I think some of what we've touched on is about how power and decisions get made about us, and I think the difficulty about getting involved with this is kind of where is the authenticity of so John, you talked about an experience with your theatre. You definitely found that to be an authentic, life-changing experience. I think we are struggling at this point to still work with, I will agree with Kevin that local authorities by their nature are cautious guardianship kind of ethos, but that doesn't stop them working with other partners who can do other things well with them, and then building that trust that Jess talked about, so that you begin to get an authentic voice, and that you're not at loggerheads with each other. And I think we have still got an enormous amount to learn about that, and it derives from having public debate. So one I see tonight as being an important step forward. It's kind of come from that inspiration of Isolation Station saying, well, in a COVID world, we can't meet physically. What can we do? And start a debate online. So this is a really good example. It's great to have Kevin here participating in that. I want more of his colleagues to come and be a part of that. And also Jess's aspiration that there should be more of this type of dialogue happening. Because what are we going to do? We're just scratching the surface tonight, and there's so much more. And this panel, or I will say on this panel, I'm not an expert in this. I feed off the ideas that other people have, and that's what I need in order to shape what our organisation can do in terms of trying to bring some resources to make these things happen.
And Jess, do you want to come in on that as well?
I thought James did that really well. I just would like to say the point. I don't think it's the caution in local government that is the problem. It might be a bit annoying here and there, but there are good reasons for it. It's what we really need is curiosity. We want the council to be as curious about what everyone else thinks as we are, because I think that curiosity is what drives the sort of much more dynamic ways of thinking about things.
Brilliant answer. Yeah, curiosity is a good thing, I think, and it is interesting because as Kevin knows, I've banged on a lot in the past about St Mary's and the castle and ownership of buildings by the council and taking ownership of those spaces, because that's again is another amazing space which is being battered around from year to year, from person to person, has never really found its true focus yet. And I think, personally, as somebody who's a performer and an artist and a creator of events, to have that building go to waste so much as it does tears up my soul. So I'm putting a cry out for St Mary's and the castle at some point. Right, I think we're going to round things up unless you've got any more questions to ask.
We do have one more question if we can fit it in. Andy Batsford asks, can we ask how we make sure the town centre is for all people in Hastings?
Good question. Who wants to take that one? John?
Well, I suppose the simple answer is everyone needs to come down to the town centre and take ownership. Simple as that.
Apart from the street drinkers.
Just come on down, grab your bench. If you want to have a drink, do it in a sociable way. Remember, drinking isn't illegal in the town centre. Antisocial behaviour is.
It's not a T-shirt I'm going to buy, but it's a nice idea. Anybody else want any more comment on that one? No.
That idea that John's idea is come to the town centre. I think that's really powerful. But we do need to invite. We need to make it inviting. And as I think people said earlier, it needs to be some spaces there that don't cost money.
It's interesting.
Feel welcoming but don't cost.
I'd agree. When I ran Coastal Current Arts Festival, which I did for 5 years, 4 years of that focus was on street arts, and we used to have free street arts events in the town centre. Some amazing European, English, really quite out there stuff, which the public engaged in I mean, in the middle of Priory Meadows, we put something called the Peep Show on, which was the weirdest kind of strange. I'm not even going to go into a description of what it was like, but it was the sort of thing where I thought this is going to get us into trouble. But the public loved it; they absolutely loved it, and because it was free and because it was in a public space, they engaged with it. And I think that's what we need. One of the things I'd cry out for as well is more street theatre, more street events, more street things happening, which makes people go, there is a reason to be in the town centre today. You know?
More
Right, I think we're
spectacle.
I think we're going to round it up. If that's all right with everybody, I'd like to say a huge thank you to our panel, Kevin, John, James, Richard, and Jessica. Thank you, Jess. Sorry, thank you very, very much indeed. Some great, insightful thoughts and some great ideas. I'd like to say a huge thank you to the public who have been engaging all the way throughout this as we go along. I'd also like to thank Steve Peake, who the historian, Quiva there, and Suzanne, who's probably somewhere on the sidelines, not being allowed to be seen on screen. And of course, Isolation Station, who, you're right, I mean, throughout this COVID time of lockdown and not being able to talk to people, it was great to have that resource and that idea there, which brought live events into people's living rooms. So full on to you guys. Thank you so much for putting this together tonight and for running a very smooth event, I think. So if everybody online could applause, as I'm sure they would be, they would be. So once you go away from here, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. There's going to be a couple of holding pages now, which will show us what you can do next. This is the start of a bigger conversation. This isn't the end. Hastings Town Centre has a future, I believe. It's one that we have to shape. So please go to the Common Treasury Facebook page and look on there. And there's also a recording of this event if you want to share this event with other people. There's a map of ideas, which is a beautiful idea you can get involved with as well. And facebook.com, commontreasury.org.uk. Get involved with that. And thank you. Thank you, the panel. Thank you, Isolation Station. Thank you, the public. I've been John Knowles. I hope I haven't been too controversial, which would be a different thing for my life. Take care of yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Cheers.